I'm glad, Gerry, I'm glad this happened to you because you've seen me do so many stupid things. It doesn't even faze me that you know, were a part of this. It's beautiful, actually. All right. So tonight we are going to talk about all sorts of stuff, but we are going to start with a story and a reading. And I'm not going to make you guys meditate tonight because it's just too late. But I thought, when I thought about asking Gerry on the meetup, I thought, what will we talk about? And I thought, how do you talk about everything? Everything in the whole world. That is what we need to talk about. But the one thing that comes to mind when I think about Gerry Halphen, who is was my triathlon coach, was the kick in the pants I needed at the right moment, and is now a dear friend, and whose official job is a technology transformation consultant, which I had to ask him what he actually did for a living today. But Gerry is what I like to call the main participant in my spark moment, which happened 10 years ago. Many of you are here because you know about that moment. I won't relive it. But all of us, some of us have that person who was at the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time. It depends on how you look at it. And yeah, that was Gerry for me. I walked into a spinning class in 2009, and he was at the front of the room leading the class, and it all went downhill from there. But I did want to tell you, I first want to read this passage I found. And this is Oprah's Wisdom of Sundays, the Super Soul stuff. But this really goes hand in hand to, I think, our conversation tonight. Let me add these people. Sorry. All right. The key to realizing a dream is to focus not on success, but on service. Ask yourself, what are the gifts and talents you can share to raise the collective consciousness of all that you encounter? Making that shift from self to service will bring an immeasurable amount of fulfillment to your job, your relationships, and the vision you have of your own life. When your personality comes fully to serve the energy of its soul is what Gary Zukav calls authentic power. Sorry, I have to keep admitting people. Fulfilling your purpose with meaning is what gives you that powerful spark of energy unique only to you. The result is an electrifying current of clarity rising from the deepest part of yourself. By tapping into that source, you will no longer feel like a salmon swimming upstream. Instead, people will finally see the highest, truest version of you and stand in awe, wondering how you achieved your dreams. Now, that's a little bit of broad speak right there, but I liked the idea that Gerry, 10 years, 12 years ago, however long, was sitting in front of a spinning class serving a group of maniacal triathletes. And a little fat, sad lawyer, mom of two, wandered in. And he was there serving this class and inspiring people. And I am forever grateful because he continued to serve me for a long time and teaching me to become a triathlete. And one of the greatest acts of service, I'll tell this story and then I'll actually let Gerry speak. But it was the first time I had been coached by Gerry for a few months. I was heading out to do my first Olympic distance triathlon in May. This was April. And Gerry said, you need to go get a wetsuit. And I was like, what do I need a wetsuit for? And he said, well, you're going to have to get in the cold water. And I said, oh, okay. So I go to get a wetsuit, and a woman who's about 47 pounds tries to put me into a wetsuit with her bare hands, which was one adventure in itself. But then we go to the lake with Gerry, Jason, my husband, and I go. And as we're getting on our wetsuits, my husband pulls my wetsuit from the rear and rips a hole in it, which was part one of my first open water swim experience, is thinking get into the water and drown. And Gerry's like, it's fine. It won't drown you. And then he's like, come on, let's go swim. I'm like, okay. But I was actually feeling really good about this first open water swim. Swimming was my jam. It was the one thing out of the triathlon things I felt like, all right, I can do this. I could not do it. I could not do it that day. And this was 6 weeks before my first Olympic triathlon. And the reason I couldn't do it was a lot of things. But I had my first ever panic attack. And this man, Gerry, was in the water with me, and my husband, who was somewhere, and they were looking at each other, like talking in silent man speak, like, she's going to drown today. And the other one's like, do you have insurance? she's going to drown today. You know, it was like this kind of conversation. But at the same time, Gerry got me safely 800 meters in a swim and out of the water. And then we walked and talked until I had calmed down. And I will never forget in a million years what he said to me. He said, all you have to do is show up on race day, put one foot in front of the other, and don't stop until you're done. And I thought, okay, I think I can actually do this thing. And that was it. And I think, and I won't speak for Gerry, but I think his experience with coaching me was probably quite a journey too, because I really don't know if you ever coach someone quite as incapable in your life as me as a beginner triathlete. But I'm so grateful that you agreed to.
Well, first of all, I have a slightly different memory of that
Yeah,
day.
this is what I wanted to
Yeah,
hear.
yeah. Let me share what my recollection of that day. First of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be a part of your community. Love what you're doing. I think now, maybe more than ever in our lifetimes, the idea of connecting and sharing and being authentic, even when it's not comfortable to do so, is maybe more important now than ever. So thank you for that. But on this day, I do remember it very vividly because Jason and I were not talking about insurance and she's going to drown. I focused on getting you safely out of that water with every molecule of my being, because my professional coaching life flashed before my eyes. What Meredith doesn't know is that I had a similar experience. I actually had the tremendous foresight to decide to try to coach my wife, which, if any of you have ever done anything with your significant other, it's about the dumbest decision that I've ever made in my life. But anyway, so my wife actually had a similar experience. I won't repeat all of the things that she said to me when we were in the water, but back to Meredith, I remember locking eyes and being as focused on conveying confidence to you. Meanwhile, I was petrified. So I was focusing everything on, you're going to be fine. And by the way, I don't know how many folks out there have done triathlons or open water swimming, but I've been doing it for a while now, and I don't know a single person who's ever done that has not had a panic attack at one time or another. So I remember telling you that this is just part of it, and you can do races and be fine. Hell, I saw some professionals who had freak out moments in the water. So, but yeah, I remember getting you back on terra firma and having a small moment of silence as my heart rate was somewhere around 205. Yeah, and my resting heart rate is about 40, so it was up there. In fact, I may have set a new record that day
Right.
for heart rate. So no, but I remember the day that you came in to spin class as well. I've been teaching, God, I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud, but this is my 21st year of teaching spinning.
Wow.
And it's one of the great joys of my life is to suffer together with a group of people on a bike. I mean, I can't say it any other way. There's something spiritual about it. But I remember you came in. Remember that I could tell right away that you were an athlete. You didn't want to admit it to yourself, but I could tell that you were. I came to find out your background, and it didn't surprise me in the least, because you had this ferocity in your eyes, but you didn't believe it yet in yourself. But I could see it, and I remember
I was just
thinking,
hungry, Gerry. I was just
yeah, well,
hungry.
yeah, you were hungry, all right. You were hungry for things that food was never going to give you, and you just needed a little bit of reflection back to you. Say, you know what? It's okay to put yourself out there. It's okay to try. Doesn't matter if you don't look like what you think a triathlete is supposed to look like. Just matters that your ass is on the saddle and you're working. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I've never worked like I don't think I've ever worked as hard as I did in your spin classes. I mean,
Yeah.
when we moved away, and I did a half Ironman without going to spin. I remember thinking, gosh, I've been riding my bike and I've been working really hard, but I'm just not in the same bike shape. And I think it was because I didn't have you screaming at me every Friday morning.
Yeah, well,
You
hold
need to sit
on,
on the
hold
front row.
on. Yeah, yeah, there was no screaming. There was no
Oh,
screaming.
right. No,
I
no.
call it encouraging. It's a slightly different interpretation.
Well, another story I talk about, especially in the book, is when I decided to reach out to you and ask you if you would coach me. And at the time, I thought coaching meant, how can you make me skinny? Because everyone in the room was skinny, and my husband was like, well, you should you should email that spinning guy and see if he'll coach you. And I was like, he could make me skinny. And so, I messaged you, and we talked after that, and you were like, well, you could do a triathlon. And I was like, why would I want to do that? And you said, well, you do know I'm a triathlon coach, don't you? I was like, sure, I knew that. And why it really didn't occur to me that that's what you were about, I'm not sure. But and you told me, you said you could do a triathlon. I see how hard you work in spinning class. You could do one. And I was like, huh, I don't know why I would want to do that, but okay. And then I did. Like 6 weeks later, I just went and found a random one, did it. It was terrible. But I do that, and I call this like multi-level marketing for life, because you like sold me that. I bought it. And then I tell other people that too, because it's like anyone that says, oh no, I can't do anything, I'm like, oh yeah, you can. And I got that from you because you did that to me.
Yeah, I'm sure you got that from many places in your life. I think the there's nothing that gives me joy more as a coach than helping someone find what's within that they don't either see or they can't give themselves permission to embrace. It's so fulfilling to work with someone and watch that happen. And I've had my own coach, several coaches actually in my career, and I never thought about being a triathlete until I was in my mid 30s. I was that guy who couldn't swim 25 meters across a pool when I was 34 years old. And so I really believe this when I say it. If I can do it, there's not a single person who can't. Now, unless you have an injury that prevents you from swimming. But oh my God, I once had a coach tell me, if I could take your effort and put it into a swimmer's body, we'd probably have an Olympian. But unfortunately, your legs. What did he say? He goes, you effectively have two bricks tied to the bottoms of your ankles. So you're going to have a hard time swimming. And, he's right. I did have a hard time swimming, but I persevered because I'm sort of crazy that way.
Yeah. And one of the stories that comes to mind with your craziness. And so for those of you that don't know, Gerry is a Kona qualifier. He qualified in 2009. 2009, went to the Big Island legitly, not on a lottery or any other way, like legit did that, which blows my mind. Too bad I couldn't quite do that for you, Gerry. But I remember that my husband and I were at Lake Lanier. We went up there to ride one day, and I guess we were leaving or pulling in, I don't know. And I saw someone running that looked like they were weaving. And I thought, hey, Chase, that looks like Gerry. And he's like, well, should we pull over? I said, yeah, I think we should pull over. And so we pull over, and here comes Gerry, like running like Mach 10, as fast as I've seen him, but also weaving like this. And I'm like, hey, Gerry. And he comes over, you come over to the car window and you lean on it, and you are like out of it, completely out of it. And it was like, you knew, like you were like, I know you two, but not. And then you just like kaput onto the pavement and laid down. And like after I had a gel, I gave you water, like we resuscitated you, and nothing was wrong except you had pushed yourself that hard.
Yeah, my therapist would tell you that there's a lot of demons there, and I spent most of my life, I think, fighting them. This idea of fight or flight, my response is to fight them. And my therapist, who I think is one of the most intuitive women I've ever met in my life, she goes, well, first of all, how's that working out for you? And then secondly, how about you make friends with them? Let's try that for a while. So the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years of my life have been more about making friends with those demons. They still fuel me, I'm not going to lie, but we often have little chats and share a tea or a coffee instead of locking swords, you know?
So how do you have that? How do you have that ability to drive yourself so hard that you
Mm.
can just like lose your wherewithal? I mean, I feel like I can push myself, and I have. Um, but I feel like you have always had that since I've known you, had that ability to really go about 6 steps over the line.
You know, I don't think there's anything spectacular or amazing about it. I think we each have that somewhere inside of us. The question is, how do we manifest it? Some people are able to focus for, like lasers at work. Other people can give kindness to animals or children on levels that others of us can't even contemplate. I don't know. I think I find something spiritual and very cleansing about testing the body with the mind. And honestly, I'll say it. It's 20 years of practice. Also, it's not something that I think I was born with. It's more of the, I don't know, about 10,000 hours that Gladwell might call it, but it's definitely a few thousand.
Yeah.
And you know, I would say I've come out of every single one of those sessions maybe a slightly better human. And by that I mean there's a humility that comes from pushing yourself to the level where you're not sure if you can keep going. There's a humility that you kind of understand deep in your heart, and a thankfulness that you have the wherewithal to do this. I don't know if you guys on the call, if anyone else is like me, but how do you handle it when you're sick or injured? Are you guys all good patients and you're very kind with all the people that love you? And
Yeah.
yeah, no. um and so I think it's also a coping mechanism, right? It's a way to let out some of the frustrations and come out of it, I think, in a positive way. So I think other people channel it maybe in what, at least in our society, might be construed to be not so positive a way, whether it's drugs or alcohol or any other kinds of behaviors like that. It's just an outlet.
Yeah. All right. We've got a question, I think. Carolyn, are you asking a question? I'm unmuting you, or did you accidentally raise your hand? That happens. Okay, I'm muting you back. I'm lowering your hand. All right, but if anyone has a question, feel free to jump on. That's what this is for. So if you have any questions for Gerry. One of the things I remember you telling me many times, I think in the last decade, was triathlon training, whatever the goal is, should be a positive stress,
Yeah.
not a negative stress. And I have used that so many times with my clients and baby triathletes that I coach, that triathlon training, all that stuff should be a certain stress, because you have to have a certain stress in order to grow. But that really stuck with me, and it helped me make the transition out of triathlon when that was right for me,
Mhm.
because it was a giant negative stress. It was not necessarily the sport that was stressing me out, but it was like the role I had crowned myself in the sport, plus the drama around it. And I was like, this is not a positive stress anymore. So how have you how did you come to that conclusion, and how were you able to use your training for a positive stressor? Because you always had a really stressful job and family life and all that. So how was it, how did you kind of compartmentalize it?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I had done it well for a long period of time. I think I learned through some bad experiences. I think I learned where that line was. My wife can tell you when, and by the way, I qualified in 2009, but it took me 5 years of concentrated effort and more than 65,000 miles of training. I know because I kept every millimeter in a log, right? But my wife would find me on the floor in the garage, curled up in a fetal position, crying after a bike. And one might say, well, that's psychotic, that's stupid, right? That's not worth it. And I had to learn to back off that line a little bit. But yeah, I feel like if I'm hearing from an athlete that I'm coaching or even just talking with, that everything about the sport as they describe it is a negative, then it's time to think about, why are you doing this? Because I think it was Nietzsche. I'm going to misattribute the quote if it's not him, so someone check me on this, but I think Nietzsche basically said, he said a man, but he meant everyone. A person with a why can withstand almost any what. So that why, that concept of a pilot light, if that goes out, the little things start bothering you. And I call it the triathlon industrial complex. There's this sort of industry weight, and these people that would run their grandmother over to climb 3 spots in their age group, that kind of thing I don't think is healthy. And so when that pilot light begins to flicker, one of 2 things: either find some more fuel to keep it going, or move into something else that you feel jazzed about. Because we're only on this earth for a short period of time. Doing something because you think you're supposed to be liking it, but you're not, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Suzanne asked, Meredith, can you talk about what drew you back to Gerry for coaching? What drew me to him in the first place, back to him again. And I honestly think, and this is whether Gerry, you might not agree. I've had several coaches, and I've had Gerry, I've had some other coaches. If I have a goal and I need to meet it, and I have my why figured out, I will always pick up the phone and call Gerry first. And I will be like, will you coach me to this? And he will say, okay, or maybe not. But it's because Gerry, when I came to him and I said, I would like to do an Ironman. Granted, I had only done a half. I had not, and I don't mean only, I just mean only, because when you're talking about Ironman, you can say only a half. I had done a half, and it was in 7 hours and 15 minutes, which is not fast. And in order to do an Ironman, you got to do it in 17 hours, which is usually like double it and add an hour is like the formula. And this man did not blink. He said, yeah, you can do that. And I said, okay, well, I think I'm going to do Florida. And he's like, well, how many Ironmans are you going to do? And I said, one, only one. And he said, well, you should do a really hard one. And I was like, aren't they all really hard? He's like, yeah, but I'm thinking more like Coeur d'Alene. And I was like, okay. But the type of coach that can look at me and know that I had a why, I had the fire, I had a work ethic, I had some limitations, but that can work with me in that realm, who I am, what my challenges are, and tell me, yeah, you can go do this, and mean it. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe he was like this behind his back.
No.
But I will always go back to Gerry for that. And that's the kind of coach I try to be when someone comes to me, because that's all it takes to achieve. Now, I worked really hard, but that's really all it takes to achieve big, ugly, hairy goals is the mindset. And Gerry helped me have the mindset. When I was an Olympic weightlifter, I failed at mindset. My mindset took me so far, and it tanked on me. I didn't have it. I was also 17, 18 at the time. But Gerry helped take my mindset even further. And so I know that if I ever have a big goal and I go to him, that he will help me take my mind that distance. And so that would be why he will never be rid of me.
No, I think a couple of things. There's a connection, right? A trust level. And when you really trust someone, you tell them the truth. You may do it in a more kind, gentle way than if you don't care for the person. But there's a level of accountability, and it's two-way. This is the thing that I really look for in a relationship with someone that I'm coaching. It's got to be two-way accountability. It's got to be a real honest, transparent exchange. Otherwise, pardon my language, but what is the point, right? I mean, why, it's just not worth it to waste time and energy doing something that you're not really putting yourself out there. Because I don't know about you guys, but man, my biggest gains have come from taking on the biggest, hairiest challenges that I could think of. And it's not always pretty. But I want to come back to one thing, Meredith, and that is this idea of a catalyst. So any chemistry majors out there? Anybody science, hard science major?
How about we can go bring Jason? Do you want him to come in here?
Yeah. Well, this idea of a catalyst is this agent that speeds up a chemical reaction but doesn't get consumed in the process. So that is the materials, the raw materials are there all along. It's just, you used the term before, Meredith, spark, right? It's this, how do you catalyze that potential that's there? See, I find that to be fascinating, and frankly would love to spend the rest of my life figuring out how to catalyze human potential writ large. And then on the small scale, it's a triathlete, or it's a person who wants to qualify for Boston, or a person who wants to do an obstacle course race and they've never really done anything like that, right? So that concept resonates with me. And you also touched on a term earlier, service. It's an honor and a privilege to serve someone in the pursuit of their goal. And man, does it feel good when that happens, when they get there. I will admit, Meredith has made me cry on about 12 occasions. So when she says she reaches back out to me, usually it's laced with some 7-paragraph text that makes me cry. So I can't be driving because I'll run off the road. I have to set the phone down and I cry a little bit, and because she usually tells me similar things we're talking about having such an impact on her life. And the truth of the matter is she's had as much, if not more, of an impact in return. And she doesn't want to believe that, but it's true.
I taught you how to coach anyone.
She said, did you hear what she said before? Olympic level weightlifter. Okay. You don't buy that at Walmart. You work your ass off.
Translate to running.
No, but it translates into someone who has a long term goal and has suffered greatly over a long period of time in pursuit of that goal. That's the essence of endurance sports. It's not about whether you can run or bike or swim. It's how bad do you want it, and can you stay in that frequency?
Yeah. Some of the things that you've told me, someone's got a question. Just text me the question if you want to. Or do you want to ask it? Just let me know. One of the things you said, let me see. Oh, this was the single greatest cycling piece of advice, and you give it in your spinning class, but you say, where can you relax? Yeah. And when I was climbing the mountains in Coeur d'Alene and I was going 6.8 miles an hour up the mountain, I was like, I'll get there. It'll be fine. It'll be there. It'll be fine. If I go 6.8 the whole time, I will not get there, but there's a downhill somewhere. I know it's coming. But I remember you saying, where can you relax? And when you're on a bike, and this applies to life too, what can you relax in order to be the most efficient with the rest of your body, the rest of your mind, the rest of your spirit? I carry that with me everywhere. On the bike, we tend to do this, like tighten everything else. And you taught me in spin class, you should be like almost not even touching your handlebars, and all the energies in your butt and your quads climbing the mountain, right? And so I have thought about that many times, when I'm in the middle of something that's really hard, it's like, what can I relax so I can use the right energy? And how did you learn that? Was that something that you picked up from someone, or was it the Gerry Halphen hard way?
And I think it was a lot of reading about physiology and this idea of focused energy. The two things that I came to learn, both cerebrally and viscerally, were number one, where can you relax? And number two, where is your mind? So if I could stay in the moment and not what in long distance sports is sort of the death knell, it's called projecting the pain forward, right? Like I'm at mile 2 an Ironman bike, and I have 110 miles to go. Oh my God, I'm not going to make this. I'm already sore. My back's hurting. I don't have enough. Did I take enough intake? You know, blah, blah, blah. And you just start spiraling versus, okay, I'm relaxed. My legs feel good. I mean, I know exactly what I'm doing. Thank you. That's the sort of corollary is to say thank you out loud. I don't know if you remember that in race plans, Meredith, but this idea of purposefully and audibly articulating gratitude. It's amazing how much energy that brings back.
This little sticky, it says,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. It's on my computer because I read something somewhere that just whatever the day brings you, whatever the shit the universe throws at you, you should be like, yes, thank you. The answer is yes, thank you. So, yeah, that's part of what you taught me too. Like, be grateful the whole time. Yeah. Grateful for the pain. Purposeful suffering. I know that term. Okay, so Pixel 3 says he or she or they have a question. So I'm going to unmute. Pixel, you are unmuted. Or you are
Sorry,
gone.
Meredith. It's Kristen. I didn't realize I didn't have a name.
Pixel, what's up? That's your pet name.
My fault. So let me see if I can articulate this correctly. But my question is about what you think about the vocabulary in triathlon. So a lot of people use the word athlete. And I know like Mel Urey is a regular person. She has a regular job, but yet she's done Epic 5. She's done Uberman. So the people like me that haven't crossed that threshold of actually doing a triathlon, I always feel like there's the people that are really good in solo sports that can pull that inner drive from within to push their goals. And then there's the people that need the outside resources. And it's not always reasonable financially and time and all of those things. Like, what are your thoughts on getting over that threshold and being okay and being comfortable with saying, I am an athlete?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say the sport of triathlon has very little to do with being an athlete. The sport of triathlon is just one sport of hundreds of ways of expressing that. And the term, I think the term athlete, particularly in the Western world, has a connotation of pride or swagger, right? Like I'm an athlete, right? And so is not an athlete, but look at me, I'm an athlete. That whole derogatory kind of shaming thing, I find to be a phenomenal waste of time and energy. To me, an athlete is anybody who wants to push their body with their minds, and that can take any form of expression. It could be lifting, it could be running, it could be biking, it could be chopping wood, it could be, you know what I mean? So triathlon is just one of many different forums for that. I will say, I think I used the term before, triathlon industrial complex, right? There's this whole aura about, especially as I got closer and closer to qualifying, I tuned into this more and more, where these people were just psychotically driven to get that external validation. And I'll tell you this, did you say your name is Aaron? I see Pixel 3, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, it's Kristen.
Kristen, I'm sorry, Kristen. This is the honest to God's truth. You know, when I finally qualified, I let go of that as my goal. So the year that I qualified, I did what I said before about being in the moment, and I honestly didn't care. Like, I was happy that it happened, but it wasn't the definition of success.
Right.
And so, but that took me 4 years of basically buying into that whole bullshit of either you're an athlete and you qualify and you're this elite person, or you don't and you're an also ran, which is it's anathema to what I really believe the essence of the sport tries to be, which is, pardon the pun, tries to be, which is get people active, get them into things that where they engage with other human beings, because there's something positive about being around other people challenging themselves. There's just something delightful about that, and very human. And so I don't know if I answered your question, Kristen, but yeah, I think athlete is a very broad term. Triathletes certainly don't have the corner of that market by any means. And I don't think you need to race in order to feel good about who you are as an athlete. Not you personally, anyone, right?
Right. No, you absolutely answered my question. Thank you. Because it's an internal motivator that I drive against, and then sometimes it tears me down because I'm like, oh wait, I'm not one of those people. I'm just a regular person, and so I struggle with that to find my drive. If that makes sense.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And I think first of all, thanks for having the courage to ask that, because I think that's probably more common than some people want to admit, is this sort of fear. Do I measure up? I remember Meredith, there were times when I had to talk her off the ledge about, well, I can't do this. I'm not made like those other people. I'm not
Right.
120 pounds. And
Hashtag truth. I was.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And she will tell you, I said, I don't care about those other people. I don't care about this is what I said, you're putting this extra pressure and weight on your shoulders when you don't need it. It's like you have every single bit a right to be out there competing as any elite professional triathlete does. And oh, by the way, that's one of the things I love about that sport is the pros and the amateurs are all mixing it up on the same course on the same day, right? So, I think a lot of people have this sort of fear of I don't measure up, or I can't do that. And the truth of the matter is, like I said before, if my junk in the trunk self, who swims through the water like this, if I can learn how to somehow get through the water, then my God, anybody can do this sport.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
There was a question from Martha. She had asked, I lost my why last year. I'm still finding my way back. Can you talk about ways to find your why?
Wow. Yeah, that's, I don't think anyone on this call would be honest if they said they never lost their why. So that's a common problem, actually, not an uncommon one. It may not be that much solace when you're in that space, but I certainly have lost my why before. And the way to find it back, I think, is to use all of your faculties, that is your mind, your heart, your soul, and your body, and put some effort into, so what has made me most fulfilled as a human being? And you might need to take a break from physical activity, for example, which hard for someone like me to do, but I've learned that lesson before, persistent injury. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Yeah, but I'm okay. So I'll just rest a day or two, and then I'll go right back and actually go harder and make up for the lost time. And I end up re-injuring or extending it. So I think reading, meditating, talking to people that you trust, and asking them, when you have seen me most happy or most fulfilled, what was I doing, or what vibe was I putting off? And listen to what they have to say, people that really care about you. And that'll help, I think, if not reignite the flame, it'll certainly put a few sparks in the neighborhood.
Well, and I think too, sorry, were you done?
No,
yeah. I think too that there is a time and a season for everything. And I know for me, the reason I was doing Ironman and the reason I was training so hard at the time, it was serving a special need in my life to compensate for the lack of health. It was a compensatory effect of allowing me to continue my bad behavior with drinking. And to go, hey, look, I rode 100 miles. It doesn't matter that I drink 3 bottles of wine a night. And so it was interesting when I quit drinking that I quit doing Ironman. Like, I was like, this is dumb. Who wants to do this on a Saturday? It's interesting. And I think if you're honest with yourself, like what need, if you came into triathlon with a certain need, like I did, which was just to find myself again. And then I started to define myself. You may not need it as much, you may need it for different reasons. And that's okay. If you keep trying to find your why and your why says, that's okay too. you know, to be honest with yourself about that, I think is really good, because like you couldn't pay me enough to do 100 miles on a bike right now. I mean, you could, like, I mean, Gerry could probably talk me into it. Aaron, with that thought, when do you tell your athletes that they are runners? Wait, when do you tell your athletes they are runners, bikers, and swimmers? I've been running for over a year, and I struggle to call myself a runner, especially since I use the Galloway when I run.
I think this is in line with Kristen's question about defining athlete externally rather than internally. Same thing. Hey, if you've ever raced a race to your full capacity, sometimes you go over the edge. The fastest Ironman that I ever did was 9 hours and 58 minutes. And the slowest Ironman that I ever did was 13 hours and 12 minutes. And the reason for that 13:12 is because at about mile 13 of the run, my right calf completely and utterly locked so badly that it was like someone had shot me. So I walked the second 13 miles.
That was Coeur d'Alene 2013. That was
It
my
was.
first. I remember
It
seeing
was.
you walking, and I passed you, and I started crying because you were walking. I was like, if he's walking, what is to come of me?
Talk about humbling. But my point is that the Galloway method is a phenomenal method that helps thousands and thousands of people be active. You're every bit a runner as any Galen Rupp or any of the people that are running Olympic marathons are runners. So I'd say call yourself a runner. Hell, get a tattoo and put it on your arm. Runner.
And also, don't poo-poo Galloway, because my fastest Ironman run was Galloway. I did a 3:1, my fastest ever. My stubborn ass husband, I coached him to Augusta 2 years ago. He's like one of those that believes you have to run things straight through, and that's worked out real well for him every other time. And so I was like, can you just experiment? Like, let's just experiment. Let's do a 1-to-1. You run as fast as you freaking want for a minute, and then you walk. And he ended up doing his fastest 70.3, did a sub-6 of 5:54 in Augusta, doing Galloway. And it is like, it's remarkable. If you do it right and you really dial in your intervals, you will be a better runner than you will ever imagine.
Totally agree with you, especially if you don't have a running background. It's a phenomenal way to get into that and frankly, to add a lot of volume that your body may not be ready to do. But yeah, I would say I have several athletes that I've coached over the last 10 or 12 years that didn't have a running background and used that method. It kept them from getting injured, and they ended up with a better time than they would have.
Yeah. So does anyone else have any questions? You've got an amazing resource right here, so feel free to ask. What would you like to talk about, Gerry? I know you always have interesting stories. I'll give you the floor. What's going on? How's life?
I'm in an interesting place in my life. I have a daughter that's a sophomore at college and a daughter that's a junior in high school. So my wife and I are getting ready to be empty nesters and are in that mode where we're wanting to simplify things and minimize. And so going through and shedding a lot of the weight of the crap that you accumulate over 30 years of being together. And as a result of that, as well as other things in my life, I'm spending a fair amount of time writing, but writing in journals, but also Meredith is going to laugh when I say this out loud, partly to get out of my own way. But I've been writing a book. I've got things on my desk. These 3x5
That's the first time you've admitted that.
No. And the reason I'm finally getting out of my own way there is because, back to the point about Meredith being as much an inspiration to me as she claims that I've been hers, that I see the reach that you can get and what I would call the asynchronous reach. That is, you can write some concepts down, people can read it in time and space where you're not connected with them necessarily, and it can have a profound impact. And so maybe it's because I'm nearing the end of my life. I don't know. Maybe that you see all this gray, but I want to I want to be able to impact people at scale. And the truth of the matter is, I'm not sure that I have anything interesting to say, and I'm trying to sometimes outwit myself and be, you know, cleverer than I think
Oh, I know what you need. Hold on. Before I forget, I could probably tell you this offline, but this book, Gerry, do you know this book, The War of Art?
I have heard of it, but I have not read it. I like it already. The name.
Okay, so you are talking about the resistance. So this is Stephen Pressfield. This is for anyone who wants to write a book or do something creative, and they keep. And it's short. It's short, and it's got, you know, it's easy. You can read it in an afternoon, but it talks about the only thing we're fighting in our life is the resistance. And the resistance is the thing that says, I don't have anything interesting to say, or how, and it prevents you from writing. It prevents you. It's the resistance. In this book, The War of Art, it talks about how to win the war of art. And so everyone read this, but sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt it.
I love it. I have personally moved away from triathlon as well as a laboratory, and have moved into obstacle course racing. I don't know if there's anybody out there that has done any of that stuff, but oh my God, it's kicking my ass. And my neighbors find it, I mean, you have to understand, I have two daughters, so part of my job is to embarrass my daughters, right? I mean, that's kind of what you take on as a father, but like I'll cut my grass with a weighted vest. I have a 5-gallon bucket from Home Depot with 70 pounds of rocks, and I carry it up and down a hill in this park near my neighborhood, and army crawl like 250 meters, you know, just doing stuff that I think is going to prepare me for those kinds of races. And whew, my body is definitely feeling the difference between that linear motion of a triathlon where everything is in a straight line. Now I'm carrying, you know, uneven loads across uneven terrains, and it's back to, I can't remember if it was Martha or someone who said they had lost their why. It's kind of reigniting a why in me around this idea of pursuit of a challenge, not because it's easy, but precisely because it's not easy. And I mean, I crawl off these fields and I look like a homeless man, but there's a smile on my face because it's just something really pure about it. So
I cut my grass in a weighted vest. On that note, we're going to go ask Ben a question. Ben, you are unmuted.
Hey, Meredith and Gerry, thanks for letting me join in today. Gerry, I had a question on the Galloway method. So I'm a big fan of the Galloway. I really encourage folks who are starting to run to use it. So I've done 3 fulls, but I was wondering at what point is there a diminishing return on the Galloway? Like, so I'll run my marathon at about 340 or high 3s when I'm doing it in an Ironman. Can you still get advantage from the Galloway even if you're running at those clips or faster?
yeah, Ben, I think the short answer is yes. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that go into it, so I'd have to have a deeper conversation to understand some of the things about your physiology, maybe injury patterns and other things. But Jeff Galloway would tell you that absolutely. And one of the keys is about keeping your heart rate from spiking. And so this idea of a relatively more even heart rate pattern, that also impacts the longer that you run that way, it impacts your ability to metabolize calories. So I don't know about you, but I got to the point where I could tell you plus or minus 1 beat where I needed to be, where I could still digest calories. And I knew this from lots and lots and lots of hours out doing it. So when I qualified that year, I knew this. I even had it written out. I had a watch, but I had it written right here. 153 was the heart rate at which I could go my hardest, but not go so hard that I couldn't digest calories. So I think Galloway, is part of its design, is that it forces your heart rate to come back down a few beats. And so you relatively keep a lower one. And I don't know if you've ever had any issues digesting calories. I made every mistake you can make. The first one, I looked like I was 4 months pregnant. at the start of the run. So I ran the entire marathon with that slosh. Has anyone ever done that? Got that slosh where you're not digesting calories, just sitting there. So I learned that, and it was painful. But yeah, I would say, back to Meredith's point, do some experiments and try to be as objective as you can be. Because even in your language about it, I think you were saying, you only do it when you're fat and slow or whatever. I think Galloway himself would say, I'm not so sure that's the right way to think about it. It's more about, and here's the key, it may work for you to go faster that way, but it may not. So you just have to test it, but you got to be honest with yourself about setting up an experiment, right? You're in your own laboratory, and I'm going to run a 15-mile run and do it without, and then, see how it works for you.
And Ben, I know, Google like Galloway's actual method, because I feel he does this thing where he glides, so he never actually like slows down to walk. It's like a glide into a walk, and then he picks it up. But I think he qualified for the Olympics doing Galloway, and I think he did a 20-second run, 10-second walk. So it's like a so I think the faster you go, the shorter they are, and there's a rhythm. But I feel like it was like 20 seconds, 10 is what he qualified.
Yeah, I was going to say there are varying intervals like you talked about.
Yeah.
And again, it's all about experimenting. Most people need about at least a minute for their heart rate to come down by at least 5 beats. And that's part of why he did that, I think. But some people's heart rate is much more responsive. So, yeah, good question.
Jerry, do you have a hard stop, or can we go a little bit more?
You know me, I've never met a microphone I didn't like. So, Ben, is that a Clemson Tiger shirt you got on there?
It is. It is.
All right. I ask you because one of my best friends here in Atlanta is he basically has turned orange. Like, it's not jaundice. It's just because he wears orange so much. But I'm from Louisiana and grew up a big LSU fan. So this tested our friendship, and
I bet it did.
He was very gracious. I smoked 3 packs of cigarettes during the game and was nervous as hell. But anyway, go Tigers.
Well,
Sorry, I didn't mean to unmute you. Sorry. Okay.
That's right. I was just saying thanks, Jerry. I appreciate it, Meredith. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Question from Kelly. Why is it that while my coach sees me getting fitter and my stats, I don't feel it? I'm training for my first Ironman.
Ooh, yeah. Well, this is part of why you have a coach, because we all have blind spots, and sometimes if you listen to the voice inside your head, it doesn't really tell you either positive things, or it doesn't tell you the truth. And so I think that, back to my point earlier about having a trust-based relationship with a coach, you've got to you have to trust that they're going to tell you the right thing. And then sometimes at the time when you are least confident, you got to lean on that coach to say, no, you're going to be okay. I've seen this before. And if the coach can articulate back to you what you're really feeling deep in your heart, then let go of control, let the coach help you, and get out of your own way.
Yeah. That's so true, because I mean, I called Jerry. I think I only freaked out like maybe 3 times, but they were pretty big, 5, 6 per race, per month, per week. But I remember one in particular. I was out for like a 13-mile run, and I sat down on a bench and started crying. And I called you, and you didn't answer the phone, which was a good thing. And then by the time you did talk to me, I kind of told you what happened, and you said, "Look, race day is one thing. It is about moving forward with a purpose all day long." And I thought, but when you really break down a race, when you're not racing, when you're not out there trying to qualify for Kona, and you're just an average girl or guy, and you just want to finish, that is the truest, most honest advice ever that you can apply to race day. It is about continuing to move forward all day long at a pace that you can manage, and then eating the snacks, especially Ironman. That's it. And so
Yeah,
that was such good advice.
yeah, and I think back to the you don't see it, right? You gotta you gotta break it down before it gets built back up. I would just caution, make sure that you have a very open conversation with your coach about rest, how much rest you're getting, and when that rest is coming, because you don't make gains until you actually get the rest. And so maybe you need a little more rest so that when you come out of that rest, you have made some of those gains and you feel better. Because I will say this, you, you know, 90% of this, if not more, is psychological about, do you trust where you are in your trajectory? So think about training as a trajectory, not a straight line. And are you on the right curve? Uh, and rest sometimes is exactly what you need. And ironically, it's when you feel like you can afford it the least is when you need it the most.
Right. Because you're feeling so good because you're like, I'm putting in all these miles. I'm crazy. I haven't slept in a month. It's like, whoa, time to sleep. Time to rest. Okay. Carolyn has a question. I trained and completed a half Ironman. It was exhausting. Would do a full. Is the training as exhausting, but more?
You know,
That for me or Gerry? We have different opinions, probably.
yeah, I was just saying, I want to hear your opinion, then I'll give mine.
So it's interesting. Like now that I've done the Ironmans I have, and now that I've coached for several years, if I have an average athlete like myself who is going to do an Ironman, and they say I want to do a 70.3, within 8 months of that Ironman, I tell them no. Now, a lot of people will coach their athletes. So we're going to do this is the peak race. We're doing 70.3. We're going to rest. And then we're going to do the Ironman. I don't do that for my athletes for one reason, because every half Ironman and finish line I have crossed, I've said, there's no way in hell I could do that again. Or that is entirely too long. Or there's no way. There's just no way. And so I don't subject my athletes to that, because I know every time I've done 70.3, I have thought, how in the hell did I ever do a full? Or there's no way. So it's different beast. It's different paces. It's different everything. So the short answer is, is the training exhausting but more? I don't think the training's as exhausting, but it's more.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree with that last statement. I think I have suffered more in half Ironmans than I have in fulls, because you just physiologically cannot go that fast in an Ironman distance. You just simply don't have enough glycogen, and you don't have enough glycogen to go that far in a half, but you can get much closer to that red line. So yeah, I've danced with my demons more in a half Ironman than I think I did in the full. Other than Kona. Kona was its own separate brand of hell. I mean, I just wouldn't have believed people when they told me about how hot and windy it was. I mean, it was like racing inside of a blast furnace is what it felt like. Um, yeah, Kona. I mean, it was a magical, mystical, religious experience on some level. But I remember this very vividly at the top of Pellini Drive when you turn on the Queen K. You're at about mile, 12 or 10 or 11, 12, somewhere in there on the run. And there was a porta potty. And I don't know if anybody out on this call has been to Kona before, but they set these out a week in advance. Not pretty. Baking in 130-degree heat for a week, and these are all elite people, right? That come out there, they're pushing their bodies, and you know what I'm saying. I remember clearly climbing inside this thing, and it was as filthy as anything I've ever been in my life, and I was hurting so bad that I thought, you know what, I could sit here for a while. It's not that bad. That's how hot it was. So, but yeah, I think just because you struggle in a half doesn't mean that a full is double that struggle. It's actually more about how much can you dose your effort. Yes, the rides are longer. You can't fake a 6-hour bike. And honestly, things like, how does your pubic bone area handle being in the saddle that long? Do you have enough chamois butter, or, these are, if I'm working with a new athlete, your body's just not meant to sit on those bones for that long. Getting used to that, and then getting used to the idea of I'm going to dose my effort. I think that's the hardest part of an Ironman. The actual half is way more intense and more painful to me.
I would agree on that. Okay. Did that answer your question, Carolyn? Okay.
Yes, thank you. It was good.
Great.
You're welcome.
Tanya, any tips on heart rate? I'm just starting out and I'm way out of shape and my heart rate spikes at almost nothing. Yes, this is the gold. Listen to Gerry. Listen, everyone.
This is one of the most difficult things to actually follow. But I'm really glad. Is it Tanya?
I think it's Tanya, because I think I called her Tanya once and
Okay,
I got it wrong.
Tanya, thank you very much for asking this, because I think this is one of the most important things to get right in endurance sports. Patience is more than a virtue. If you do not slow down to the point that you can have adaptation happen at the cellular level, you're never going to reach your potential. So what the hell did I just say? That means if you can only walk a 20-minute pace to keep your heart rate down at the beginning, that's what you need to be doing. I worked with an athlete who was an 800-meter runner in college. He couldn't run a 5-mile run without blowing up. And the reason for that is his anaerobic engine was off the charts. His aerobic engine sucked. And so he needed to develop his aerobic engine. Now, luckily for me, he trusted me. So he ran 12-minute miles, which that may not sound like it's super fast or super slow, depending on your relative thing. But to understand, he ran Division I track 800 meters. To ask a guy like that to run a 12-minute mile, he looked at me like I had 5 heads. I said, Chris, trust me. If you believe that I know what I'm doing, we're going to work from 12 and it'll come down to 11 and it'll come down to 10, it'll come down to 9, it'll come down to 8. And he believed me. And over a 6-week period, back to your point, we had a test, we had a lab area where we ran the same 3-mile run over and over again. And the first time he ran it at 12-minute pace to keep his heart rate below the threshold that we were trying to manage. And it drove him crazy. Old ladies with walkers were going by him in his mind, right? And all of his buddies are like, dude, what are you doing? There's no way you're going to get faster running 12-minute miles. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. All you're doing is teaching your body how to run slow. Well, guess what? He adapted at the cellular level. He got more and more efficient. And eventually he was running half Ironmans and then full Ironmans at a sub-9 pace. So to go from a 12-minute mile on an easy run to a sub-9 pace for an Ironman that's significant. But if he didn't do that first 6-week block of humble pie, I called it, he would never have gotten there.
Yeah.
So the point is, it's not about 12 minutes. I don't care what the time is. You just have to find that threshold and stay below it, low zone 2, until you adapt.
And if you need to know like what low zone 2 is in my book, like there's a whole section. I know most of you probably have it since you're on this call, but if not, there's an article online that Gerry wrote that I put on my blog I can send you to. But when I did Marine Corps marathon as a pusher, I contacted Gerry to help me out. And he was like, well, here we go again, marathon training. How long has it been since you've done your heart rate training? I'm like, oh yeah, I've been all over that. And so I think we did some testing and he said, okay, so, and I was scheduled to go to the Cayman Islands to run a half marathon because someone was sending me there. And he said, okay, so I'm going to need you to stay below 125 beats on your heart rate. And I was like, okay. I could not run at 125 beats at that point in the Cayman sun. So I ended up walking at that half marathon because it was not about finishing at any pace. It was about adapting and using that 3 hours and 15 minutes. I think it took me to get those changes. But like Gerry says, if you stick to that and you have a coach who will dial you into that, it takes longer for super beginners. I'll tell you that. It takes us longer. But once you get it, you adapt a lot quicker. Like if I started training right now, I would adapt a lot quicker than I did back in 2011. I think it's real stuff,
Yeah,
science.
for sure. And it takes discipline and humility. And this is the thing, back to our other conversations about what is an athlete and, should I be ashamed if I'm walking, running, all that? I'll say all the time to athletes, you know what? You're doing a time trial and you just so happen to have a couple hundred other people doing a time trial at the same time that you're doing it. But it's you against you. You're not racing anybody else. You're just racing yourself. And man, when it starts to click and you feel, holy shit, I'm now running X% faster at the same heart rate. It's like it's a rush of endorphins because you built that, you did. And there's something deep and sustaining about something that you build yourself.
Yeah. And another thing that I want to add too is when you're starting out, it's really, really hard to do the running outside in front of the people. It's hard to do things in front of other people. I felt the first spinning class I walked into, I mean, Jerry's like, I remember you. I'm like, yeah, I bet you did, but it's like you feel like everyone is looking at you, but really the truth of the matter is no one's paying any attention. Everyone's too worried about themselves. And so just go run outside. Just go. Don't let that stop you. That's my biggest advice because no one really cares deep down.
Agreed.
They don't. Well, does anyone have any more questions? This is the longest I've gone with anyone, Jerry. You and I could just be like, well, this is an Ironman edition. We're in hour 8.
Yeah.
What's everyone doing?
There are people laying down on the side of the road.
Well, from the very, very bottom of my heart, I am grateful to you, Jerry. I am grateful for everything that you have ever said to me, all of it, and just for the way that what you've meant to me in my life. I am so grateful for you. And I know everyone else that has read my book and known about the blog feels like they know you and feels the same. So thank you.
He's trying to make me cry again.
I'm going to see if I can do it live.
Yeah,
it's like, I'm not going to cry. Yes, you will. Cry, Jerry, cry. No.
Listen, it's very humbling to talk about stuff like that. I'm an extrovert. I don't know if there's other extroverts in the call, but I get energy from this. So forget sleeping tonight. I'm going to probably be doing push-ups and writing a book because I get so energized from this.
Yes, write your book.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you all for participating. And I'm really happy to be a part of this community that you've built. So thank you, Meredith.
And if anyone has any follow-up questions, do you care if they shoot you an email or?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. ghalphen@gmail.com. Happy to help. I'm not sure if I can answer your question, but if I can't, I can certainly direct you to much smarter people than me that could probably get you that answer. I'm willing to share all the scars. I mean, you can see a face like this. I got a lot of scars. I'm willing to share any and all of that with you if it helps you. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Tomorrow's meetup is with Myrna Valerio, the ultra runner. She's got such an interesting story. That's at noon tomorrow Eastern time. So I hope you can join us. And Jerry, maybe we can come back. You can come back and visit us sometime.
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks, guys. Have a good evening.
Bye.